nail biters when it comes to society. The Lord has placed us here at this time with our children. So there's a purpose in all of this. We do not have to be afraid. But there is a fear that can make you alert and can steer you in a better direction. Proverbs 22:3 says, the wise see danger ahead and avoid it, but fools keep going and get into trouble. And so we need to be looking ahead, what's coming, and we need a plan. So these default settings that I keep talking about, I think there's probably a lot of them. If we all, maybe when we do the Q&A, you might have different default settings than my husband and I had, depending on the culture of the family you grew up in. I was not raised in the church. My husband was not raised in the church. So we were very, very in the world. So I want to talk about 5 default settings. And the first default setting that I want to talk about is this idea that exposure to social situations is enough to learn social skills. It's not. It's just not. You can't just go to all the things and think at 16, 17, or 18 that they're just going to have it all figured out. Exposure's not enough. In my experience, the children and the teens don't just figure it out. They need coaching. They need debriefing. There has to be conversations. Now, I don't think parents should hover over every social situation. I don't think every social interaction needs observing or analyzing or even your input. However, there is a lot that we can share. A lot of things that our children go through. If we kind of go back in our mind, yeah, I felt like that. I felt left out. I felt like I couldn't stand up in that situation even when I knew it was wrong. Now, we are living where there is a trend of free range, more of a free range feel. And I suppose it's a needed correction if you are truly a helicopter parent, truly a bulldozer parent. But also, homeschooling is not synonymous with being a helicopter parent. And man, I get tired of seeing that online, where just because you homeschool, then it means you're this type of parent. It's not true. And according to my husband, they're in the school system too. So, it's not just us. So our family, we are not a free range family. Nobody that knows us would ever label us as a free range family. We would definitely be labeled as the protective, sheltering. Our timeline is really different than a lot of people. Not that we said no, we're never doing that, but it was not at that age. We were always, and still are, we're always later, it seems. Yes, that movie, but not now. Yes, that social situation, but not now. So I think that would characterize us pretty good. Now, even though we were not free-range parents, my adult children describe situations to us where they were left. And when I hear the stories, I regret not being a little more helicoptery. They were hard situations. I'm not even talking about like really sinister things, but it was really hard for them to navigate, and they needed input. They needed help. And for whatever reason, we were busy or just not paying attention to these situations, especially reoccurring ones when they're happening over and over again. So our children need us to teach them manners and etiquette. I think one of the best things you can do is teach your children about themselves, who they are in the Lord, who they are uniquely. You have these giftings. You have these things that you can work on. help them to understand what an introvert is, what an extrovert is, and how those different characteristics play out in a social situation. Your introverts need a little more help with entering into those social situations. If you're an extrovert and those things just come naturally, you're missing an opportunity. You're missing teaching your child something they actually really need. They really need help figuring those things out. And the extroverts too, they just barge into social situations. They don't hold back. Well, they need information too. They need, okay, this is how it might come across. This could be off-putting. They need that information. I also think they need to work towards understanding other people. And I'm not big on like labeling, oh, that person is this, that person is that, but giving them a general understanding that the Lord did not make a cookie cutter, or didn't use a cookie cutter when he made all of us. We're all just beautifully and uniquely woven together, and that the people they interact with are like that as well. So default setting number 2, events are not fun, special, or meaningful unless friends are there too. And I have seen this in my own family. I have seen this in other families where the feeling is if it's just the immediate family, then it's boring. And it's actually not an event then, if there aren't friends there. And I would encourage you to be purposeful in carving out time to just be your immediate family, and even for special occasions. It doesn't have to be every special occasion. Maybe you pick one that's just for you guys. Or maybe you rotate. There are lots of options, but it is important to spend time just you guys. I'm 52 years old. I've been married for 30 of them, and I have lived longer away from my childhood family. And a lot of our kids are going to spend most of their life away from us. And so I just can't stress enough that this is a really precious time. And it's good for our children to feel like it's fun just with mom and dad and the siblings. Now, a story that I wanted to share, and I am pretty sure that I've shared this here, was about the first New Year's where we decided to forego the standard, you spend New Year's with friends. And we decided it's just going to be us. We had 4 children at the time. So, Josiah, he works here. He would have been a baby. And we had invitations to participate with other families, and we just thought, no, we're just going to give this a whirl, see how this goes. Because I would say even my husband and I, there were some things we had to figure out socially too, like that we can have fun just with our kids. There doesn't have to be other adults there. And we went all out for that New Year's. We still had all the party food. We still had games and activities and prizes. And I had a kid, one of my older children, come up to me and was confused because I was making party food. And she said, I thought you said it was just going to be us. And I said, it is just going to be us. You're doing this for us? Oh, yeah, okay. That was an eye-opener. Yes, I am doing this just for us. It's going to be a party, just us. And so I would really encourage you to carve out time like that. Okay, default setting number 3. There is something missing if you don't have a best friend or a close friend group. In our culture, best friends and friend groups are social currency. They somehow, it is seen that they add some sort of, that obviously we love having friends, but so I don't mean yes, they add value, but there's this social currency, like if you don't have a best friend, then you're like a defect or something, or if you don't have a friend group, then your life must not be as amazing or special, or the people that are always surrounded by big friend groups and they have best friends. And so I do think that that is a default setting that we have. Because of this, I think as parents, and we've definitely done this, we make bad decisions because of that social currency, and our kids make poor decisions because of that social currency. And so our children need to be aware. We need to have these conversations with them that this is the way the world is, but we're going to try to act differently. We're going to try to think differently. Now, I have a best friend, so I don't want to undervalue what that means. She loves me. She knows all my faults, and she is still my friend, and I love her. But also, have you seen the best friend dynamic among teen girls? It can be ugly, even in the homeschool crowd. I mean, those of us that went to school, we all know it can be pretty nasty, like in school, but even in the homeschool crowd, it can be hard to handle. And I've seen my kids be instigators of that. I've also seen them be victims of that. I would say specifically, we should be watching our girls. Are they excluding others? Because when you're sitting in a group and this is my best friend, what you're really saying is, I choose this one. Now, if you guys want to be best friends, of course, by all means, like I'm not against best friends, but that announcing and that, it's very exclusive. It feels like you're excluding, and like this is the exclusive thing. And so I think particularly, at least in my experience, it can be a real problem with girls where they're very territorial of their friendships, and there can be damage and real hurt that happens because of that. We don't want them to feel like their worth is measured based on friendships. Who's your friend, who's not, how many do you have? So keep in mind also that a tight friend group, yes, can be a source of joy in childhood, but man, they can get complicated when they're teenagers. And so my suggestion is always to have a variety of friends, a variety of friend groups, be hospitable to lots of different people. We have a great opportunity in homeschooling to really promote friends amongst various age groups. You know, when I was in school, I was just explaining this to my kids, I don't know, last week over dinner, that when I went to school, I wouldn't dare talk to the grade 5 kids when I was in grade 3 or grade 4. Like, they would not want to have anything to do with you. But then when I got to that stage, I was the same way. You're talking to a grade 1 student, like you just didn't mix. And so we have this beautiful opportunity for that to not matter, that you can be friends with all different ages and not be thought of as weird. So yes, have a lot of different friends, and also be brave enough to jump ship if something is concerning. That's not easy to do, and I don't think we should do that as like a knee-jerk reaction, like, oh, my kid has experienced this, now I gotta pull out. I would never suggest that. There are always conversations to be had, and there's finessing that can be done. There can be prep towards our kids, but sometimes you actually have to just head for the hills where that friendship is concerned, because you see the danger coming. And there have been times where I don't know, I've watched things unfold, and you don't want to think it's going to go in that way, and you chastise yourself for being like judgmental or projecting that, And there have been a few times now where it's really happened. And I don't know. So I just would say be cautious. We're believers, and so we have to still be hospitable and gracious and forgiving. But sometimes families or individual kids are going in a direction that you have to keep your kids back. And it's hard if they've been friends, and really hard if they've been exclusive friends. So we have been on both ends of that also, I want to say. We have been the really conservative family in the room where there's a little bit more finessing to do on our part trying to figure this out. But we've also been the really liberal family in the room where other people are concerned with what we allow. And I don't know, I guess I would just say have lots of conversations. It takes a lot of conversations, a lot of understanding yourself, a lot of trying to get your children to understand others. And yeah, sometimes you have to be brave and to just walk away, to just pull back a little bit. Sometimes it just has to be for a time. Sometimes it can be picked up later on. Also, don't underestimate the value of serving together and just simply serving together and being hospitable. Some of our best memories of socializing with others, it has been through serving. And if I could go back, I would do way more of that. That somehow the serving together, there's just not enough time for some of the drama to be introduced to the situation. So like play dates and things like that obviously are fun. We've done them. Having friends over, just hanging out, we do it. We're not opposed to that. But I don't know, there's just something special about serving together that sort of checks the boxes of feeling like you've been with people and you've been hanging out and you've been having fun, especially as a family and with other families. So if I could go back, I would try to do more of that. So default setting number 4, your children must play team sports. I think that's a big one in our culture, that to be a normal social person, you have to play team sports. And I'm not against team sports. I do not think they're sinful or bad, but we did not do team sports. And I just want to say, it's okay. Your children turn out okay without team sports, and all the benefits that exist with team sports, you can find in other ways. The Lord has provided amazing role models for my children despite not doing team sports. My oldest son has a connection with an older grandpa at church who, when he has been going through things, girl stuff, he has gone to him. And yes, he's come to us, and he's had conversations with us, and all of that is great, but he has also sought out this older, lifelong Christian, and he just graciously takes him out for dinner and, okay, let's talk about this. And it's wonderful. And he didn't play any sports, and he still ended up with a role model. So the reason we opted out of team sports was because one of our main visions for our family was not to be overly busy and to not be split apart all week long. We really wanted to be able to have dinner together. We really wanted to be together in the home. And I think it's really important, because that's, at least in our house, that's when Dad was home. So this idea that we were going to all be home together during the day, but then the evening is going to be crazy busy, and then Jeff is not part of that family time at home. It was just a strong conviction we had. And so team sports did not mesh with that. We also had a strong commitment to Sunday, attending church on Sunday, and team sports can really complicate that, depending on the church you go to. I mean, if there's Saturday services or evening services, and that's different. But for us in the church we attended, it just wouldn't have worked when we felt so strongly about not missing church. Okay, number 5. This is the last one. Number 5 default setting is that your relationship with your teens will turn sour. We believe that. We believe that, and we have been duped. It does not have to be that way. And so that's, I forgot to mention that book. Anyway, I'll mention this book. We could do a whole evening, I think, talking about this book. A book study. Yes. A book club. Okay. Book club. Put it on the calendar.
All right, done.
So this is my 3rd read time through, which I started like a year ago, but I'm really bad for. Well, I'm just bad for getting a new book, and then I read, but then I get distracted. Like, oh yeah, that book, and anyway. So yes, this idea that your relationship is just going to turn sour with your teens. We've all been duped to think that it's normal for the teen years, to be full of eye rolling and door slamming and disobedience and back talking and irritated tones. And I'm not done yet. I still have 3. I have one in particular that if there's going to be one, I know exactly. But I can say that my 4 that are now adults, we didn't have it. We didn't have it. Now, did we have bad days where people were mad and somebody had to be spoken to, and I don't know, maybe you have to have this late into the night conversation? Yes, we have all of those things. And this idea that teens then, like, they hate you and they don't want to be around you and they just are irritated by you, I think it's normal in that it's common, but it's not normal in that it's natural. And we need to think of it this way. If your spouse, who you have a good relationship with, comes home and over time now doesn't want to be with you, is irritated by you, can barely acknowledge you, wants to occupy their time with all kinds of other things or other people, we would be naive to think that there's not something broken in the relationship. And it's the same with our teens. If that's happening, something's off. And don't take my word for it. This is the book that you need to read. Something is off. And so now we've experienced these things. Like, our kids aren't perfect. We're not perfect parents. But what this book did for me is it made me realize, hold on, something's not right here. Now, I will say, I don't know what his faith is. I will say it's not a biblical worldview kind of book. That's not the intention. So there are things in there that I think I would add as a believer. So, for example, I think sometimes our children can really, especially our teens, they can detach and pull away, not just because the relationship is damaged or in a bad spot with you. Sometimes it can be sin in their life, or secrets, or different things that they're actually keeping from you. They don't even have to be terrible, but they just know that you wouldn't approve or whatever. And so I think things as simple as that can cause a rift in the relationship as they sort of pull back away from you if they're sort of caught up in things that they know don't jive with the parents. So I think there are some things for me that are missing in this book, but I would highly, highly recommend it. I think everybody needs to read this book. it really opened my eyes. I'm very grateful that I read it before the teen years, because I think sadly we're all kind of duped. And so when it starts, the eye rolling and the, I don't know, the back talking, and you just can't seem to get through to them. Like, you can't ask them to do anything, they just disobey. It just opened my eyes to not let that lie, to not let that be. It's not, it doesn't need to be that way. It's normal, and that it's common. It's not normal, and that it's natural. There's something in the relationship that needs work. And he has a whole chapter on that, like, well, what do? You start to see the relationship isn't what it should be, and what do you do? So I'm not going to go into all of that. We'll do that at our book club.
Said it twice now.
I would say this book also helped me understand my own childhood more, and myself, and how I interacted with my own parents. And I actually want to read, I'm not going to read a lot from it, so don't like, oh man, here she goes. But there's just a few things just to sort of whet your appetite, just so that you can kind of get an idea of what he's talking about. What did I want to read here? So children who lack, no, that's not the one. All the parenting skills in the world cannot compensate for a lack of attachment relationship with your children. Mm-hmm. Children are increasingly forming attachments that compete with the parents, and that really is the problem. Because we can attach to all kinds of people. My children are very attached to my mom, but it's not a competing attachment. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's the real key. I like to use this analogy, like in our family, like these, our kids are in this wagon, and we're pulling this wagon through life. And if there's somebody or somebodies, like friend groups or whatever, and they're pulling that wagon in another direction, that's a competition that is, it just becomes complicated for your child to do life when there's this competing attachment. They're attached here, but being pulled this way. They're attached here, but they're being pulled that way. And they're damaged, and that's a damaging situation. And often the parents lose. Mm-hmm. So, the chief and most damaging of the competing attachments that undermine parenting authority and parental love is the increasing bonding of our children with their peers. Children cannot be oriented to both adults and other children simultaneously. One cannot follow two sets of conflicting directions at the same time. And then finally, aren't we supposed to let go? Aren't our children meant to become independent of us? Absolutely, but only when our job is done, and only in order for them to be themselves. Fitting in with the immature expectations of the peer group is not how the young grow to be independent, self-respecting adults. I would say that, yeah. I don't know, does that strike anybody as like, just like, amen, that is good. Humans can have many attachments, but we cannot abide by competing attachments. In our culture, peer relationships have come to compete with children's attachment to adults. Mm-hmm. And with social media, oh my word, like when I think of myself, we didn't even have a computer. And I was still able, like I would say I was that. Like in my home, in my situation, I was very attached to my peers. And I did that all without social media. Very attached, fear of missing out, making bad decisions for myself because I needed to be part of the group. And we don't want that for our kids. And I love how he dismantles the thinking that's out there and reforms it into what I think is the truth. And I know there are people that hate that book. I've talked to them. There are people that do. I've had face-to-face conversations with them. What did I want to say about that? So this book requires dismantling, I think, of long-held beliefs. And my guess is that those people that really hate it have really built something up on the foundation of that more worldly way of thinking. And then it's just painful then to do that dismantling. That is what I think. And so finally, to wrap up, we all operate on autopilot sometimes. We all end up with presets or default settings when it comes to socialization and many other areas of life. And what I really want to encourage you to do is hold up those presets to the light of God's word first and foremost, but then also look at your family, talk to your husband, figure out what are your values, what are your goals, and then make adjustments accordingly. Thank you for coming. And so, questions?
Yeah, that was so, I'm gonna have to process and sit with some of those things. I think you gave a lot of words to, a lot of things that are true, need some reflection. I was just wondering, just because you're touching on wishing that you as a family had done more serving, can you give some examples? I have really young kids, so can you help me out? Can you give some examples of what that can look like?
So for us, we didn't do a ton, like I said, I would do way more, but things like really throwing ourselves into when our church would do VBS and we would all be there, and sometimes when they're young kids they're just attenders, but so things like that. My kids have been involved in theater, and so serving in that way. We used to make meals, even just for, there was what would you call it? It was called Station X in Mission. It served food too. It wasn't like a shelter. I think it was just meals for people that were homeless. And so I would get them involved in helping to make meals. My older girls helped when a friend's daughter was getting married. They helped make the food and things like that. I don't know, there's just something about being busy and together. And yes, you're still socializing, you're talking and you're laughing and you're having fun, but you're focused on something. And I have just found, if I look back, I can just go, okay, those were situations where there was just no drama. When they were all just hanging out, there were so many problems.
Reminds me of a quote what is it? In the absence of greatness, pettiness prevails. So it is almost that lack of purpose.
Yeah.
You definitely see that in the friendships that just don't have vision.
So it is hard with younger kids. But
it's something I can look forward to growing.
Yeah. It could even be in your home, just even with one other family making meals for something. Your small children aren't gonna, let's face it, when they're little, it's way more work to cook with them, but just to have them involved and have a job and to keep it like a short time, it's not endless hours where these problems develop, even just something small like that.
I've done that with a friend because we have various little, she has them right down to baby, and sometimes it's difficult to be able to do something like in your own home productive, especially if you're trying to have friends. And so she came over this one day and my daughter's room was a complete disaster. It was a little shocking to me actually, because I was like, oh, I don't know how we got here. And she looks at me and she says, we can't just sit and have coffee. Why don't we do something? I'm like, I'm so glad you said that, because I was actually gonna say, can we go in here and the girls will help us, and we got the room sorted, and my daughter was so thrilled because she's like, got my room all clean and my friends help, and it was just beautiful. And so just something super simple, and it could have been,
and just to make it part of the mix, where you just
past, but this summer we're grow a row for Salvation Army.
Oh, okay.
And my kids are competing with each other who's gonna grow or donate the most.
Fun.
And then we'll be going there to donate. Chilliwack is really nicely set up for that. So if you guys need something new to do.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Well, sorry, just like to add to that too, I've got, all my kids are little, so my oldest will be 6 in June, and then I have younger ones as well. And our church has like a soup lunch on Wednesdays, which I love, and it's a really small group of us that go, but like we have 2 older people, like one of them is gonna be 91 next month, and so my girls will help serve the coffee when we go. And it's something so simple. When we first started going, it wasn't like I was thinking, oh, we're gonna go and my little ones are gonna serve, but it turned into that where like my little one who's 3 will go around and ask like, hey, like, Mr. Klaus, do you want coffee? And Wendy, do you want coffee? And then the girls will help with the making of the coffee. And then Charlotte, my like 4-year-old, will help deliver the coffee. There's times she almost burned her hands, which was horrifying. But she was like totally fine. And the joy I see on their faces when they serve something as small as taking like less than a minute to ask, hey, do you want coffee? And do you want coffee? And then, you know, going and their sister delivering it. It's such a short amount of time, but it's beautiful socialization because then it causes them to ask older people who are not in their age category at all, would you like coffee? You know, like saying their names, etc., and interacting, but then also having that service, right? So even to, like, obviously not every church has soup lunch on Wednesdays, but to even bring someone who is older into your home. And hey, can we make you some tea? Can we make you a coffee? We made these cookies, etc. That's a form of service, and it can be in your own home. So, idea.
Piggybacking off of that, my children have started serving each other at lunch. One will make the lunch, one will make the tea, and then the youngest will get the utensils. She's safe, it's not near any heat. and to watch them come together and serve each other to make it, and then they put a spot for me, which is so lovely. And so I actually can sit and eat with them, and that it's not necessarily an outreach out of your own home, but they're even anticipating each other's needs or requirements. It's been really lovely.
Really with the family, like I think let's be real, if you can serve your family, you can serve anyone. Right? And humbly serve them.
But also food is such a great way to gather people around too. Like everybody wants to come and eat, and so even if it's in your own home, we like to do, we don't do this so much anymore, but we did for a while there. We would do 4-course meals, and my kids would help me cook, and then we would invite somebody over, and then we would do the salad course and the soup course. It was fantastic, but it was just such a neat way to just get together in the kitchen and have a vision and talk.
And it causes you to slow down too.
So much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a thought.
What?
I have a thought. You inspired me.
Okay.
My thought is about how we can be really gracious when we're asked, well, what about socialization? Without defending ourselves.
Right.
My go-to has been like, what does socialization mean to you? Because typically they don't know and they're just like saying something that they think they're supposed to say.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there are any other ideas of like how to, like, if
Well,
you
you're
wanted to be
you're
gracious.
You're more gracious than me because I just think it's not what they're actually after. I think it's more of an accusation. I don't think, I think typically.
Like, how can you diffuse that moment?
Yeah.
So I had somebody ask me this.
That's not my wheelhouse.
It's like me and the Lord have our
I am still
I had someone ask me this recently, and so I hadn't dealt with it in a while, where somebody was actually asking me about the socialization piece, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I actually just turned it into a question. I went, where are the public school kids getting their socialization? They're getting it from their peers. Do we think that that is actually the best place for them to get their socialization? Learning from people their own age who are still in the process of learning. And then they said, well, what's your answer to, like, I find a lot of homeschool kids seem very young. And I thought about the homeschool kids that I know, and I went, that's an interesting observation, but I would actually flip that again and say, I think that they're very innocent, because what we perceive as maturity is actually just a lack of innocence. Because when I look at homeschool children who are graduated, I actually think they're very mature, but they're still very innocent. And this woman was like,
Wow.
whoa, okay. And so anyway, I just turned it into a question of, what is your observation of other children in other lifestyles?
You've also raised the point of when in your life now do you actually ever interact with the same age group all the time? I mean, like, never.
Like school is actually the
Only place
place
in your
your
entire
whole
life,
life
even
for
in
that.
college, that won't
I
happen.
know, because in college I was 35.
Yeah.
Well, and now I
They
would
were
even
17.
suggest at school, during recess or during lunch, it's just like this, right?
Yeah.
So they're not even talking anymore
It's
because they're,
constant.
yeah, everybody's on
It's so-
social media.
yeah.
So, yeah, there's that, like, the real question is, if you want to think that shoving a kid around in a hallway, giving him some insults, and making sure he rushes off to the next class, if you think that's socialization, well, you can have it.
Yeah.
Or it's like, they were together, so they must have
Yeah,
been.
they
social.
must have,
Right.
yeah, that's a good point.
Jessica, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah. Both Jessica's had
I know, both Jessicas. I saw this in the back there.
I just wanted to say about the socialization piece, my response, I get it asked quite frequently because a lot of the people we interact with don't homeschool, is I always say, like, actually the socialization piece has been the most shocking thing to me about homeschooling, because we didn't plan to homeschool or homeschool long term. And now as I see, like, my nieces or other kids' friends and stuff, I really am noticing as we get older, this idea that, like, well, if someone of my same gender and my same age isn't in the situation, I'm bored and I have no one to play with. When there's no one here for me to play with, I'm bored. And so my response is, like, that my experience has been, my kids can play with anyone,
Yeah.
in any situation. Like, is there one 75-year-old person in this room? My child will have a full-on conversation with
Yeah.
you. Whatever.
Yeah.
We recently had church friends over. Their oldest is a 5-year-old boy, and my 11-year-old son was like, excellent, let's play Lego for like 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
Or like their closest friends aren't the same gender as them, you know, and that it is just, and there's no like hidden nuances behind it. It's just like, it's beautiful and it's innocent and it's sweet. And piggybacking off of, like, don't you find homeschool kids are young? Absolutely. Let them be children.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, be kids as long as you can, because it's such a small amount of time.
Yeah.
Like, play, do the things, do the kid things.
Well, and I've heard it being said more and more lately where some adults, where we're seeing adults just not being able to, like, launch, if you will, or not being able to get jobs. And the suggestion is, well, they were never allowed to be children.
Yeah.
And so now they don't know how to be an adult, right? So, yeah, stealing their innocence too early is really causing huge problems now. Yeah.
I actually have 2 questions. The first one was, can you explain your one point about social situations or isn't enough? Because I think you were saying something and then but saying it in the negative, perhaps, like with those 5, I can't think of the word, but your 5.
So I think the default setting is that just being in a social situation is enough to learn what you need to learn.
Okay, and you were saying you need to coach your children.
And I'm saying the opposite is true. Like, they need you. There has to be conversations. You have to debrief. You have to prepare. Some kids more than others, for sure. Like, in my 7, one of my daughters, she is just like my mom. She makes friends everywhere she goes, and it's just effortless. But I have other children that it wasn't like that for them. They needed not just coaching, sometimes correcting, and you know, how they've perceived something, or yeah, it's just not enough. I think of my own childhood where I just was with my friends and we just muddled our way through messy things, and it's just not enough to just let them be, I don't think. And I know that's contrary to the more free range way of thinking, but I'll tell you, I have one friend that she, by her own admission, like, I bought into the really free range way of parenting, and that her children now are adults and they have just boatloads of stories like, this is what happened there and that's what happened there, and we really needed an adult here and we really needed an adult there, and I don't know, I just don't think it's all that it's cracked up to be.
And then my other question is, so for my kids, what I always think is like, okay, they have each other like all day long. We have a big group of people, but I notice the children, like my kids will, you know, they'll fight and bicker and like, you know, be mean and hit or whatever it is. But then like a friend comes over and like maybe it's younger than they are, but all of a sudden they're being way more gracious to the friend than they would be to the sibling. Is there any way to like train children to just like encourage them, like, you could actually treat your little sister just as nice as you treated that 3-year-old boy? You know,
Right.
I don't know. Do you know, like, do you know what I'm saying? I don't know if this falls under socialization, but just
No, absolutely it does. Sorry, were you gonna say something?
That's a big thing. And what we often talk about in the home is that it's more difficult to be kind to the people that God has put directly next to you, because you know them very, very well. So that's where if you're being nice to someone you don't know as well, that's great, right? That's perfect. Do it. But your calling is to learn to be kind to the person next to you, which is your sibling. And something we've had to figure out too is, when do we need food because we're having blood sugar drops? And when do we need alone time because we've had so much, we've had so many people around, so often, that now it's just like, honey, you need to take a book, or you can put on an audiobook, and I just need you to go to your room for a while, you can play with Lego. And so as a parent, learning when, and that's where we can help our kids too, learning when to like encourage them to interact better, or teaching them when they have to disengage, I think is really important.
Because it helps them to be aware of how they're feeling, and then they can walk those steps of, oh, I do need quiet time or food or whatever.
And it goes along with the myth of sharing, right? It's like this myth where you have to just be happy all the time and get along with everyone all the time, and this is your family and we're all in the same house and just be nice and be nice. But it's true, you need to get along, but not all the time. You may need to say, I really love you, my dear family, and I'm going to be going in my room now for a couple of hours to get alone time. And then that's along with that myth. What was the myth I was going to mention? Sharing, the myth of sharing, right? Where it's like, you have to share. If you don't share, you're not being kind, you're not being nice. That's actually not true. You don't have to share everything, right?
Can I borrow your car real quick?
Yeah. Exactly. When you're welcome to come over for coffee, but you can't share my, mixer. I know you're all this stuff, my baking utensils, you can't share it, right? But and as adults, we know that, and we are careful when we get together to not presume that we can just share everything. And yet with our kids, we sort of teach them, no, you have to share everything, right? So two myths I think we have to teach our children, and that's where I'm so on the same page as Adrienne, is we can't just let them go and be free range. We have to explain these things to them because they don't know.
I would say that some of the work been encouraging me and like certain areas of my life. We've been working on this so long. Why don't you know this yet? You know, like, why am I always reminding you to be kind to your siblings? And yet that is part of the job God's entrusted us with, to be faithful. And like the verse about here a little, there a little, like, it's going to take a long time, but our job is to continually remind them, like, we're going to be kind to our siblings, and because it can be easily discouraging, like, why are they still being so ugly to each other, but then friends come over but then I look at myself and I say, well, why did I just, totally lose my temper with them? But when the friends came in, it's like, oh, hi. Where are they learning that, And we have to be faithful in our walk with the Lord and also exemplifying that to our kids, right? Like, Mommy messed up and I yelled at you and that wasn't okay. And I want want them to learn from that example. When you yell at your sister, you need to apologize, okay? And then after saying that over and over, they're going to start catching on to that, right? It's not going to come immediately and won't even come in a couple of years, it'll take a long time. But eventually that's gonna settle in their heart, especially if we're modeling that, or even just modeling repenting when we mess up, right? I think that's been the biggest thing that I've been learning. It's like, I have to show them, and I'm gonna mess up, and they have to know, what do we do when we mess up? Not that I'm perfect, right? Just that I'm going to mess up, and that they're gonna learn through my mistakes.
And I would just completely testify what she's saying is right, that you just keep doing it, and you maybe when they're little you just don't see a lot of fruit, but it comes.
Well,
It comes. It can be slow growing, but it comes.
Have you heard, like, when you've taught a child to do something 20 times, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what you need to do next if they're still not getting it? You do it 21 times.
Yeah, that is very true.
We are coming up on 8:30.
Oh.
Do we have any online questions?
No, we don't.
Okay, great. Okay, so I just want to allow for, say, 1 or 2 more questions if we have them. Go for it.
This is a different question. Manners and etiquette. Do you have some good, suggestions, resources, or, what are good ways to start teaching that in a really, specific way?
Yeah, we have read through that book.
There's a whole section
There's a
on
whole
manners.
section downstairs.
There's also some cards somewhere. I bought those.
Yeah,
We're
it's
gonna
really
give
a
a,
manner
we're,
month
we're
or
doing a draw on Saturday to give away a set of cards. Just putting that out there.
And I agree, like the
Yeah.
manners one,
Manners
Emily
one.
posts one, we've been
Yeah.
going through that, and it's been so good, because there's so many
Yeah.
things that I forgot.
Yeah.
And I'm trying not to raise feral children, when you have so many of them. And they go out in public and you're like, oh dear Lord, who's teaching you? Oh yeah, that's my job.
It really shows up.
Right?
And companies
You're like,
coming, oh, I didn't notice this.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, yeah.
There's, we have a number of resources. So you can either, we have a book on manners, just reading of what is expected. But then we have even a curriculum. It's called Myself and Others. And it even uses other texts. So you read through The Little Red Hen and you read through, I think, Winnie the Pooh, and just reading through other stories to give them examples of what kindness looks like, what friendship looks like. Kindness looks like brushing your teeth in the morning, right? It's like, if you don't brush your teeth and you just look awful and you smell awful, that's not kind to your siblings. So things like that, it'll bring out those things. And it will teach them in light of being virtuous, so that you are you're being patient and you're being kind. That's what manners really are. Yes, yeah.
Inspired me for a thought. Can I add it really fast?
Go for it.
And that is that brushing your teeth is also kind to yourself, and that a lot of the interactions that we have with others come from, like you said, understanding, knowing ourselves, and teaching our children who they are and how to love themselves the way, with true unconditional love, and to have that towards themselves. And often with siblings, they see themselves as one, you see your family as an extension of yourself. So when you're treating your siblings poorly, it's a way of treating yourself poorly. And so we can also help them understand it that way. And then you talked about the definition being socially acceptable, construct of with outside society. I forget the exact definition wording. And so that could be why we have these ideas in public we're supposed to respond one way, but in the home it's an internal place. And so it's exposing the matters of the heart rather than putting on a persona or the way that you want to behave.
Yeah. That's a good observation. All right,
we're done.
Well, thank you very much,
Yeah.
Adrienne.